If you're thinking about moving to Austin, Texas, you've probably considered or at least heard about the North Austin suburb of Georgetown. Now, full disclosure, in my opinion, Georgetown is freaking awesome. It is seriously one of my favorite Austin areas, but it's not perfect. So what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna break down my top 5 pros and my top 5 cons about Georgetown. But I'm gonna do it a little bit differently than what I've seen in the past. So I'm definitely gonna give you the positives and the negatives, but with each one, I'm gonna help you understand how it compares to a different Austin suburb. So if you don't know about Georgetown, by the end of this video, you might consider it or not. Before we get into this video, I gotta tell you something. My film guy Aaron and I recently went out and did a full vlog tour of Georgetown, and after looking back at the footage, we actually saw that there was some kind of weird setting on our drone and it made it look all weird and tan. But real quick, before we get into this video, we wanted to go back and just show you some of the beautiful drone footage that we got of Georgetown. So check it out right here. So as you can see, Georgetown really is freaking beautiful. In Georgetown, I profusely apologize for not conveying that completely in our Georgetown vlog. But let's ride that beautiful wave and let's talk about some positives about Georgetown. Pro number 1, there are so many hidden outdoor gyms. Now, if you're relatively familiar with this area, you'll know about Blue Hole Park as well as San Gabriel Park. And if you're not, just know that those areas are super popular. That being said, there are tons of other areas around Georgetown that are a bit less traveled, less frequented. They're just a little bit more peaceful and off the beaten path. And most of those areas are right in and around Lake Georgetown. We also went out there recently, and just so you know, Lake Georgetown is a massive, like I call it a hill country lake. It's not gonna be like Lake Conroe or like some of these other lakes that, or even Lake Travis right in the Austin area. And what I mean by that is you're not just gonna see tons of people partying out there in their ski boats. Like, you feel kind of isolated when you're out there, and people are free to go out there. We actually went out there recently and saw a guy windsurfing. We took some really cool drone footage of him. My wife actually takes our sons once a year and does like a 27 mile hike around Georgetown, Lake Georgetown. It takes 3 days, and they always come back, and my wife is like, you know, she did wilderness backcountry guiding in Southern Colorado, and she comes back and she's like, there are times where I feel isolated, like I'm in the San Juan Mountains or something. So a lot of these spots that I'm talking to you about right now, they're much quieter, much more peaceful, much more isolated than a lot of similar spots in other surrounding Austin suburbs. I would say that that is different from another Austin suburb like Cedar Park. So both Georgetown and Cedar Park are areas where people go to because they love to be outside. They love to be outdoors. They love to be in nature. However, Georgetown is going to give you a lot of kind of isolated, more peaceful spots, whereas Cedar Park is going to have a lot of outdoor parks and trails and things like that, but they're going to be a lot busier. I'm not here to say if either one of those is good or bad. It's just what is. So maybe you're the type of person that's like, no, I want to be like in the mix. I love being outside, but I want to be around tons of people all the time. That's totally fine. If that's the case, you might find the energy of a place like Cedar Park more to your liking. Otherwise, you might be geared more to a place like Georgetown. Now, pro number 2, the traffic of Georgetown is not as bad as a lot of the other surrounding Austin suburbs, and it's still relatively convenient to Austin. The main road that goes right through the middle of Georgetown, it goes north-south, is called Interstate 35. And I always say, I-35 was created by Satan himself, and you definitely want to avoid it at all costs. However, there is a toll road called 130 that goes around Georgetown, around Round Rock, and you kind of circumvent a lot of the really terrible traffic. In fact, I think the speed limit on 130 is like 80 or 85 miles an hour maybe, but it is a toll road. And what I love about Georgetown is that there are multiple entry points to 130. so that you can avoid the worst roads. In fact, if you frequently need to get to the airport, you can just shoot down 130 and you are there, boom, like that. Now, I would say that is different than an area, another North Austin suburb like Leander, because with Leander, there's a road called Highway 183 that goes right through the middle of town. And if you want to go in and out of Austin, there's just almost no way to avoid it. You have to take 183. And during rush hour, 183, in my experience and in my opinion, it can get even worse than I-35. But in Georgetown, you just have a lot of those kind of alternative routes. Now, I want to make a quick note. For those of y'all who watch this YouTube channel regularly, you will know that I love being outside doing tours. In fact, I talked to a guy earlier this week who was watching our YouTube videos just like you, and he and his family are moving to the Austin area. And one of the comments that he made was like, man, Barrett, we watch you on TV all the time. Like, we watch your YouTube videos on our television, and we love that you're like out there in the elements. So normally I would be in Georgetown doing this type of video, but it is freaking freezing in Austin right now, and there ain't no way I'm leaving this office. All right, now pro number 3 of Georgetown is the amazing historic downtown square with a modern twist. Now, a lot of people in the Central Texas area go to Georgetown to spend time downtown. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff to do. But what I think sets Georgetown apart is that there are lots of really kind of young, trendy entrepreneurs opening up these boutique shops, coffee shops, and bars and things like that. So it's just like this really cool, lively, energetic vibe down there. It actually reminds me of probably what downtown Austin or 6th Street in Austin was like, I don't know, in like the 60s or 70s. Like, it's wholesome. Now, I'd like to compare that to a really close North Austin suburb called Round Rock. And so Round Rock, over the years, has really developed a super lively downtown as well, except in Round Rock, a lot of the establishments are kind of more family-friendly chain establishments. Whereas Georgetown, they really do stick to like the keeping it local vibe. Now let's get to pro number 4 of Georgetown, which would be that Georgetown has relatively lower property taxes than some of the other surrounding Austin suburbs. Now, don't get me wrong, Georgetown is still in Texas. And one thing that's really hard for people to get past whenever they're moving from a different state to Texas is that we just have high property taxes. Now, quick plug, we do not have a state income tax, and depending on what your tax bracket is, I am not an accountant by any means, but when I've seen a lot of people work it out, oftentimes most people save a lot of money moving to Texas and paying our exorbitant property taxes by canceling out their exorbitant state income taxes. So if that's something that is concerning to you, definitely give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email. We would love to hook you up with a great accountant so that you can determine whether or not moving to Texas makes sense for you financially. We got your back. But relative to the high taxes in Texas and the especially high taxes of Central Texas, Georgetown has one of the lowest tax rates. Now, I would compare that to the North Austin suburb of Cedar Park, where the property taxes are discernibly higher. And the reason for that is there is a lot more infrastructure, a lot more new infrastructure in Cedar Park, as well as massive master plan communities. And Georgetown is really interesting because it is a mix of new builds and older historic homes that have a lot lower property tax rates. Now look, there are probably 2,500 positive things I could say about Georgetown off the top of my head. But if you're thinking about moving to this Austin, Texas area, this is just the 5th and last one that I think you should be thinking about. And it's that there is a thriving 55 and older community in Georgetown. Now hear me out. If you're not 55 or older, or you're not even close, don't worry about it. What makes this a positive is that because of all of the 55 plus community centers that are in Georgetown, there are lots of unexpected perks for younger people. Now, I've never heard anyone frame this like this, but this is something that I notice every time I go to Georgetown. Hear me out. The public spaces are way better maintained than most Austin areas. And I have to think that's because there are a lot of older people in Georgetown who are not busy with their jobs and raising their kids anymore. I think that there are a lot more advocates and a lot more volunteers to go help maintain and clean up the public spaces. Secondly, the hospitals in Georgetown are amazing. And usually where the average age of a community is older, you're usually going to have a better hospital system. And guess what? If you're not 55 or older, you still get access to that hospital system. And I know for us, that was super important when our kids were babies. In fact, our middle son, when he was a newborn, he was a week old, he had massive heart failure. And when he was 2 weeks old, he had open heart surgery. And it was really traumatic for our family. And I can't imagine what that would have been like if we did not have amazing medical care, boom, like right down the street. And so that's what you're gonna get in Georgetown. But also, you've got really great golf courses in Georgetown. And in addition to that, like the well-maintained public spaces, you've also got a lot of really well-maintained walking trails. I would attribute a lot of that to the older community that lives in Georgetown. Now, I would compare that to another North Austin suburb called Pflugerville, which there are a lot of reasons to love Pflugerville, but the average age in Pflugerville is a lot lower than the average age in Georgetown. And you can just kind of feel that. Pflugerville feels like it's a lot more kind of busy, younger families. And a lot of those people just don't have time to volunteer. They don't have time to go maintain the public spaces and things like that. All right, Georgetown, I am sad to say it's time to talk about some negatives. You know I love you, and this does not change my feelings for you, but you're not perfect, and here's how. Con number one of Georgetown is that there is a limited nightlife scene. It is improving. We filmed there all day, and I ended up leaving like in the dark of night, and it was so cool. Like I felt so safe. There were families out there, all right? At night, you got coffee shops, bars, restaurants, breweries, like really cool family-friendly things. And I saw tons of young people. However, as I was just doing some research, like, oh, when does that place close? When does that place close? Most places, even in the vibrant, kind of bustling Georgetown downtown square, close at 9 or 10 p.m. Now, if you're an old man like me with kids at home, I don't care. I'm trying to be in my bed at 9:30 p.m. However, for people who are a lot younger than me, they might hear that and be like, what? I want to be out till like midnight, 1, 2 in the morning. And so if you want to live in Georgetown and that's your vibe, you're either going to have to get in an Uber and drive down to Round Rock or the city of Austin. Like I said, I would compare that to Round Rock, where I seriously can't believe I'm saying this. Like I never would have said this 10 years ago about Round Rock, but there really is a thriving nightlife scene in Round Rock, like places, bars, breweries that stay open really late. I can't imagine wanting to stay up that late, but if you do, and that's your cup of tea, that's your cup of IPA, be my guest. Now, con number 2 of Georgetown is a weird one, and it's probably that you're gonna have some weird wildlife encounters in some unexpected places. I already told you about how one of the great things about Georgetown is all the things to do out in nature, and there's the big Lake Georgetown, but there's a dark side. I'm just kidding. There is a flip side of that, and it's that in Georgetown, you're gonna see deer, snakes, even wild hogs in some places that you might not expect. And so if you're moving here from an area where you don't really interact with a lot of wildlife, you could wake up one day and have a freaking wild hog in your backyard in the middle of your master plan community, and you're gonna be like, what the F? I've heard of a lot of deer-related car accidents in Georgetown, as well as some unwanted backyard visitors, let's say. And I'm not talking about your annoying next door neighbor. I would compare that to a couple of deep South Austin suburbs, like Kyle or Buda, where I would say there's like similar vibes of like people loving to be outdoors, lots of parks and trails and things like that. Lots of kind of farmland all throughout the city. But I don't hear about people encountering wildlife up close and personal near as much as I hear about it happening in Georgetown. Con number 3 of Georgetown is that it has grown a ton over the last several years, and that has come with some growing pains. Historically, a lot of residents of Georgetown have really prided themselves on kind of living in an area that's a little bit off the beaten path. Like, it's not Austin. It's not super weird. It's kind of out in the country. They just kind of do their own thing. It's not busy, it's laid back, it's chill, and you don't have to pay the crazy Austin prices for homes there. However, in more recent history, it has really grown a lot, which has come with a lot of construction, both road construction, residential construction, and commercial construction. And there's no question about it, especially over the last 10, 15 years, home prices have risen dramatically in Georgetown. Still nothing like Austin. I would say longtime residents of Georgetown are definitely noticing that shift into like a booming suburb. And I would compare that with the suburb just to the east of Georgetown. It's called Hutto, and Hutto is definitely a lot less developed. There is way less going on in Hutto than Georgetown. However, for now, prices are a lot more reasonable in Hutto, and it's not nearly as competitive. And hey, if you're finding this information useful, do me a favor. I've been doing YouTube for over 10 years, I guess 11 years now, but we just recently started this brand new channel a little bit over a month ago. And it would really help us feed the algorithm gods if you subscribed. That would mean the world to me. Now, con number 4 of Georgetown is going to be the water supply and the drought issues. Now, this is something that honestly, like I do not feel like I hear enough people talking about in the United States, especially in Texas, because that's where I live. It is like, what is going to happen with water over the next 10, 20, 30 years? It's kind of a positive and negative. Like, a positive is at least areas like Georgetown are trying to do something about it. But the con of the water issues in Georgetown and our droughts is that you're going to be pretty restricted on water use. Now, I think that's kind of a good thing, but some people might be like, more independent, freedom-minded people, which I am also, but you might it might grate up against you having someone tell you how you can use your water. So you are definitely going to have water restrictions during dry months, again, which I think is totally reasonable, but that is going to affect the way that you can do things like water your lawn. Now, I would compare that to a West Austin suburb, and that would be Dripping Springs. No pun intended. So Dripping Springs has even more restrictive water restrictions than Georgetown, and that's because in Dripping Springs they rely a lot more on well water and the aquifer, whereas Georgetown has a lot larger kind of city managed water supply. So again, we are in Texas, there are droughts here, the water problem is still freaky to me, but the problem is a little bit more severe in Dripping Springs than in Georgetown. All right, now con number 5. Now, I also feel like I don't hear this talked about a lot as it relates to Georgetown, but in Georgetown, the HOA restrictions in the master plan communities can be surprisingly strict. Now, I kind of think that's like, maybe just to me, it's like pretty jarring because again, growing up, coming to Austin, I've been coming here for 40 years, and I've always thought of Georgetown as just this big, wide open, peaceful kind of live and let live sort of town. But like I mentioned before, over the last several years, there's been an explosion of big premier master plan communities in Georgetown. And those communities have some of the strictest HOAs of any of the other surrounding Austin areas that I have had experience with. And those HOAs are gonna regulate things like lawn maintenance, if you can park vehicles on the street. And we're even talking about like restricting the modifications that people can make on their own homes or even on their own properties. I'm not saying if you live in a great master plan community in Georgetown, you can't park your car on the street and you can't do anything to your house. It's just something that you're gonna wanna be mindful of when you're thinking about moving here. So if you are considering an area like Georgetown or any other area and you're like, man, I wanna make sure I don't get, hooked into a psychotic HOA, you're gonna wanna give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, because we wanna know that that is something that is important to you and we can point you to the perfect area. I would contrast that characteristic of Georgetown with an area also in Northwest Austin, and that would be Liberty Hill. And in Liberty Hill, there's just no two ways about it. Like, there are a lot fewer kind of HOA controlled neighborhoods. Even a lot of the big, really popular neighborhoods in Liberty Hill, they straight up just don't have HOAs, or maybe they have voluntary HOAs, or just like a lot less restrictive homeowners associations. That's what HOA stands for, by the way. So in general, if something that's really important to you is you want more complete freedom with your property, Liberty Hill might be the place you want to take a look at. But if you're like, hey, I get it, you know, an HOA is an HOA. Most of the HOAs in Georgetown are not insane. You just got to know where to look. Now, if any of this is intriguing to you, you're definitely going to want to check out the full vlog tour that we did of Georgetown right here. And you might even want to check out the full vlog tour we did on the South Austin suburb of Buda right here.